Millionaire gave $300 to a homeless woman, but the next day he made a shocking discovery when he saw her at his wife's grave. Michael Evans was sitting in his luxurious conference room, surrounded by colleagues who were frantically discussing the company's expansion plans. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the glass table where rising graphs and financial reports were displayed. The atmosphere was charged, voices overlapping with the clatter of pens and the tapping. However, for Michael, all of this felt distant and irrelevant. He watched his colleagues with a vacant expression, his mind far away, lost in memories that insisted on resurfacing. In front of him, a picture of Emily, his deceased wife, smiled from its frame, shining with a brightness that to Michael now seemed a cruel reminder of everything he had lost. Her smile, which once lit up his days, was now an echo of pain. He sighed deeply, feeling a wave of guilt wash over his heart. If only I had been more present, he thought, but quickly pushed that idea aside. The meetings, the business, everything he had built seemed so insignificant in the face of her absence. "Michael, are you listening to us?" asked one of his partners, breaking the trance he was in. Michael blinked, trying to refocus on the discussion. "Sorry, what did you say?" His voice sounded distant, almost like a whisper. The partner rolled his eyes but continued to present his ideas about the new product line. Michael nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in memories of Emily. After the meeting, he decided to step outside for some fresh air. The streets of New York were vibrant, full of life, and he felt like a spectator in a world that no longer included him. As he walked, his thoughts were interrupted by the sight of a woman sitting in a corner on the sidewalk, wrapped in a tattered blanket. Sarah, as he would soon learn, had tired eyes, but there was a silent strength behind them. Michael hesitated for a moment, but something inside him urged him to approach. "Hi, how are you?" he said, trying to sound friendly. The woman looked up, surprised by the unexpected attention. "Hi," she replied, her voice low and hoarse. "What do you want?" Michael felt a pang in his heart. "I would like to help. Can I offer you something to eat?" He wasn't sure what he was doing, but a surge of compassion guided him. Sarah regarded him with suspicion. "It's not every day someone offers to help," she commented, her expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "I just wanted to do something good today," Michael said, pulling a 300 real note from his wallet. "Here, use this, for whatever you need." The woman stared at the bill in disbelief. "You don't have to do this," she murmured, emotion beginning to surface in her voice. "I insist," Michael replied, forcing a smile. "No one should have to go through this." He saw the internal struggle in her eyes, but beneath it, there was a quiet gratitude. Sarah accepted the money with trembling hands, and something in the exchange felt transcendent. "You don't know what this means to me," she said, a thread of hope in her voice. "I don't, but I want to understand," Michael said, his heart racing. The simple act of giving seemed to have broken the ice between them. "If you want, we can talk more. I can help you find a shelter or a place to stay." "I don't know if I want help," Sarah replied, her voice now a bit firmer. "But thank you. This is already a start." Michael felt a mix of relief and sadness. He said goodbye to Sarah but couldn't help glancing back as he walked away. The image of her, wrapped in her blanket, was etched in his mind. Later that day, he arrived at the cemetery and made his way to Emily's grave, the pain of loss reverberating in his chest. "I'm sorry, my love," he murmured, kneeling before the tombstone. "I don't know how to move on." Memories of shared laughter, dreams, and unfulfilled promises flooded his mind. He felt an overwhelming weight, a guilt that would accompany him for a long time. But in that moment, there was something more, something he couldn't ignore. The connection he felt with Sarah, even if fleeting, seemed promising. It was as if the universe were giving him a second chance, an echo of the past that could perhaps lead him to redemption. The next day, the sun timidly rose between the skyscrapers of New York, but Michael Evans already felt consumed by loneliness. After giving 300 reais to Sarah, the homeless woman who crossed his path, he couldn't shake her image from his mind. Something about her troubled and yet attracted him. He decided he needed to find her again. As he walked through the bustling streets, his heart raced with each step. It was a strange feeling, as if Sarah were somehow the key to something he was seeking without knowing. When he spotted the woman sitting in a corner, his expression lit up with a mix of hope and apprehension. Sarah was wrapped in a dirty blanket, her hair disheveled and visible signs of a hard life etched on her face, but there was a strength in her eyes that intrigued him. "Hi, Sarah," he said, approaching her. Can I sit down? She looked at him, surprised, but nodded. Sure, sir, I didn't expect to see you again. Michael, he corrected, sitting next to her. You know, I can't stop thinking about you. How are you doing? In my usual way, Sarah replied, with a sad smile. But I appreciate the help you gave me. It's not every day someone cares. He hesitated, feeling an urge to ask more about her life. Do you have family around? Friends? No. I lost contact a long time ago, she said, looking at the ground. I used to be a teacher. I had a life full of dreams. But life, well, it has its way of knocking us down. Teacher? Michael was surprised. You don't seem like the type of person who should be here like this. Sarah chuckled lightly, but the pain in her laughter was palpable. And who is the right type to live on the streets, Michael? Life is a series of choices, and sometimes even the best choices lead to dark places. He felt a tightening in his chest. And what happened? What brought you here? She hesitated, her gaze distant, as if reliving painful memories. I had a daughter. She was everything to me. When I lost her, the world collapsed. After that, everything became confusing. I didn't know how to handle the pain. I ended up here. I'm so sorry, Michael said, feeling her sadness wash over him like a tide. I lost my wife in an accident. It's hard to find meaning after someone you love is gone. Tears filled Sarah's eyes, but she quickly brushed them away. You're not the only one carrying pain, Michael. But what happened to your wife? If you don't mind sharing. He looked up at the sky, searching for the right words. She was on her way home, and I couldn't get there in time. I should have been there. You can't carry that guilt alone, Sarah said, her voice soft yet firm. Sometimes things happen, and we can't change them. You need to forgive yourself. Michael looked at her, impressed. It was as if through her pain, Sarah had found a wisdom he had yet to reach. You know, I never thought much about that. I always believed that guilt was something I had to bear. Well, I'm here to tell you that you don't have to, she replied, looking into his eyes. Just as you helped me, maybe I can help you too. We're all connected in some way. He felt an urge to open up more, something he didn't often do. You knew Emily well, didn't you? Sarah hesitated again, and Michael sensed there was more to her story than he imagined. She was a very dear friend. I remember her smiles and how she always dreamed of helping others. Were you with her before the accident? Michael asked, his voice almost a whisper. Sarah looked down, her expression growing heavier. Actually, I was driving on a parallel road. I saw everything happen, but I couldn't do anything. The revelation hit Michael like a storm. He felt paralyzed by the same guilt that had consumed him for weeks. So, you saw what happened? Yes, Sarah replied, her voice choked. I wished I could have done something, but it was too late. I always felt responsible. Silence hung between them, heavy and charged with emotion. Michael felt himself sinking in a sea of guilt, while Sarah dealt with her own burden. They were intertwined by a tragic connection, and although the wounds were deep, a spark of hope began to emerge between them. Before we continue with this emotional story, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories, and let us know which city you're watching this video from in the comments. Michael sat on a wooden bench in the park, watching the dry leaves dance in the wind. Autumn brought with it a palette of warm colors, but the beauty around him couldn't warm the chill that had settled in his heart. The memory of Emily remained a constant shadow, and he wondered if he would ever escape the weight of guilt that oppressed him. At that moment, he spotted Sarah approaching. She walked slowly, her eyes lost in thought. Michael felt a strange connection with this woman who, like him, seemed to carry an invisible burden. He greeted her with a nod, and she sat beside him, keeping her gaze fixed on the ground. You seem distant, Sarah said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, but there was a firmness that Michael admired. I'm just thinking about a lot of things, he replied, looking away at the horizon. Sometimes I wonder if it's possible to move on. Move on, Sarah repeated, as if the phrase held special weight. I used to think it was, but life teaches us that the past never completely disappears. Michael watched her closely, intrigued by the depth of her words. He wanted to understand more about her life, but he felt that there was something she still wasn't ready to share. What do you mean by that? He asked, encouraging her to open up. Sarah took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. When I lost my daughter, I thought I could just go back to living, but I didn't know that the pain would become a part of me. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in a cycle of memories, as if I'm trapped in an echo of the past. Michael felt his heart tighten. He knew what it was like to live in the shadow of pain. I lost my wife in an accident, and there are days when guilt consumes me. I wonder if I could have done something to save her. Sarah's eyes filled with empathy. I understand. What happened to her? She asked, gently placing her hand on Michael's arm. He hesitated, but the connection he felt with her encouraged him to speak. It was a car accident. She was on her way to an event, and I wasn't there. I always thought that if I had been present, maybe things would have been different. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the weight of his confession. I was driving on a parallel road when it happened. I saw everything, but I couldn't do anything, she said, her voice choked. I just froze while the world fell apart. Michael turned to her, disbelief etched on his face. You were there? You saw everything? Yes, and to this day I can't forget that moment. The sound of screeching tires, the impact. That was the last day I saw my daughter. Tears began to slide down Sarah's face, and Michael felt his own heart shatter. I was the one who took her to that party. I was the one who should have protected her. The silence that followed was heavy with pain and understanding. Michael didn't know what to say, but he felt an urgent need to comfort her. He leaned closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. You are not responsible for that. Sometimes terrible things happen, and we can't control them. Sarah looked at him, searching for answers in his eyes. But I feel responsible, and it consumes me. Guilt is a shadow that never leaves me. Michael realized that as they spoke about their pains, they were somehow trying to find a path to healing. He felt closer to her than he had ever imagined. We have to learn to forgive, not just others, but ourselves. She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. I wish I could believe that forgiveness is possible. Then let's try together. We can find a way, Michael said, feeling that even in pain, there was a spark of hope. They were both echoes of the past, but perhaps together, they could start to create new sounds, new paths. Michael withdrew from his friends and family, sinking into a cycle of loneliness that seemed endless. The pain of losing Emily still consumed him, and he felt like a castaway in a sea of sadness. He wandered the streets of New York, ignoring the messages and calls from people who cared for him. Life had become a series of indistinct days, where the only thing that kept him awake was the weight of guilt he carried. One morning, while walking through the city, he remembered Sarah. Just the image of her, sitting on the sidewalk wrapped in a tattered blanket, with a gaze that seemed to carry the weight of the world, lingered in his mind. He felt a strange need to connect with someone who, like him, also bore a deep pain. When he finally found her, Sarah was sitting on a bench watching the flow of people around her. The sun filtered through the trees, casting light on her weary face. Upon seeing Michael, a flicker of surprise and hesitation crossed her expression. Hi, Sarah, he said, trying to sound casual, but his voice betrayed a weakness he couldn't hide. Hi, Michael, she replied, giving a slight smile. What brings you here? I just wanted to check on you, he said, sitting down beside her. I was worried about you. Sarah looked at the ground, her expression turning somber. I don't know if I'm okay, but I'm here. That has to count for something, right? Yes, Michael agreed, feeling a growing connection between them. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being fair to you. You have your own pain, and I don't want it to become a burden for you. You're not a burden, Sarah responded quickly, lifting her eyes to meet his. We're both just trying to find a way to cope with our losses. I lost my daughter, and you lost Emily. Sometimes we just need someone who understands. The silence that followed was heavy but comfortable. They both were aware of the pain they shared, yet still hesitated to open up completely. I feel like you know more about Emily than you're telling me, Michael said, his voice almost a whisper. I need to know what happened. What did you see? She hesitated, her gaze drifting into the distance. I don't know if I should. It's a hard memory to share. Please, Sarah, he pleaded, sincerity shining in his eyes. I can't keep living with this doubt. I need to understand. She took a deep breath as if preparing to plunge into icy waters. I was driving on a parallel road when the accident happened. I saw Emily's car. I saw everything. Michael felt the world around him crumble. You saw everything? What happened? The anguish in his voice was palpable. Emily was happy, Michael. She was laughing and singing, just like she always did. But then it all happened so fast. A car swerved into her lane and I couldn't do anything. I wanted to scream to warn her, but I was too far away. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as her words intertwined with the pain they both carried. I didn't know, Michael murmured, guilt consuming him. I always thought that if I had been there, maybe I could have done something, but you were there and you couldn't do anything. That's unbearable. Don't blame yourself, Sarah said, placing her hand over his. We both lost someone we loved. Guilt is a shadow that follows us, but we can't let it define who we are. Michael looked at Sarah, realizing that somehow she had become a reflection of his own pain. It was as if, by sharing their stories, they were creating a safe space where they could begin to heal. Both were broken, and somehow this fragility united them. It's hard to think about moving forward, he admitted, the sincerity in his tone resonating with the pain they both felt. But maybe together we can find a way. Sarah smiled sadly, feeling that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't alone on this journey. Maybe, but for now we just need to be honest with each other, and that's already a start. Michael watched Sarah with a mix of empathy and concern. He decided it was time to do something concrete to help her, a gesture that could not only change her life, but also bring new meaning to his own existence. With this intention in mind, he invited Sarah for coffee at a small cafe nearby. It was a cozy place, with walls adorned with old photographs and the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. Sarah, I'd like to help you find a shelter. There are some organizations in the city that can support you, Michael said, looking into her eyes, searching for a sign of hope. She hesitated, her expression a mix of gratitude and distrust. Michael, I don't want to be a burden to you. I've done that once before and I don't want to make that mistake again. It's not a burden, he insisted, running a hand through his hair. I want to do this. I need to do this. I feel that in some way it helps me too. I see that you have incredible strength and you shouldn't have to live like this. Sarah looked down, her hands nervously intertwining. Strength is just a facade. What you see is only a reflection of who I used to be. I don't know if I can go back to being that woman. Michael leaned forward, searching for the right words. I don't know everything you've been through, but I know you don't have to face this alone. We can do this together. Every step counts, no matter how small. She took a deep breath, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Do you really want to help me? I'm not used to accepting help. Yes, Michael replied, the sincerity in his voice echoing in the small space. You don't have to be alone. We can work together. Let's take the first step, and then we'll see where it leads us. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed. Okay, but I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of you. Don't worry about that, he smiled, feeling a bit relieved. Let's just focus on what we can do now. In the days that followed, Michael began researching shelters and social reintegration programs. He felt increasingly connected to Sarah, and this motivated him to delve deeper into his own pain and to better understand Emily's life. He wanted Sarah to have a better future, but he also hoped to find a path to healing for himself. One night, while they were at a cafe, Michael asked, Sarah, have you ever thought about writing about your life, about everything you've been through? She looked at him, surprised. Writing? I never thought about that. What would I have to say that's worth reading? You have a unique story, he said, gesturing with his hands. People need to hear about overcoming love and loss. You knew Emily, and that's something valuable. Think about what she meant to you and what you learned from her. Sarah frowned, reflecting on the idea. I don't know if I'm ready to relive all that. The pain is still very intense, and I'm afraid that writing about it will pull me down even more. I understand, Michael replied, his voice gentle, but maybe it's a way to release those feelings. You could use writing as therapy. Tak tafin. And I'm here to support you if you decide to move forward. She smiled shyly, feeling a warmth in her heart. Thank you, Michael. You really care. That means a lot to me. Michael smiled back, feeling that he was doing the right thing. And if you're unsure, we can take it slow. Just write down some ideas, no pressure. Who knows what might come from that? Sarah looked out the window, the movement of the city lights reflecting in her eyes. I'll think about it. It could be an interesting path. As they continued talking, the connection between them deepened. Michael was not only helping Sarah, but was also allowing himself to open his heart again, something he thought was impossible after Emily's death. In a way, they were both healing, one step at a time. Michael and Sarah were sitting in a cozy cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. The soft afternoon light filtered through the windows, creating a warm atmosphere that contrasted with the sadness they both carried. Michael stared intently at his cup, lost in thoughts about Emily and how the loss still affected him deeply. Sarah, on the other hand, observed the bustling street outside, reminiscing about happy moments that now felt distant. You know, Sarah began, breaking the silence. Emily always talked about how she wanted to help others. She had a huge heart. Michael nodded, remembering the sparkle in Emily's eyes when she spoke about her charity projects. She cared deeply for people. Sometimes I feel like I failed to support her as I should have, he confessed, his voice trembling slightly. Don't blame yourself, Michael. You weren't there in that moment. No one could have predicted what happened, Sarah said, trying to calm him. But in her heart, she knew that the pain of guilt was a shadow they both carried. I wish I could have done something. Anything, Michael replied, frustration seeping into his tone. Now, all that remains are these memories. Memories can be both a blessing and a curse, Sarah reflected, looking into the distance. They remind us of what we've lost, but also of what we lived. He looked at her, admiring the depth of her words. You are amazing, he said sincerely. I can't imagine how you cope with all of this. Sarah smiled faintly, but her expression soon turned serious. Sometimes, it's easier to hide the pain, but it always comes back, like a wave crashing on the shore. You always think it's gone, but then another one comes stronger. The conversation flowed naturally, like the leaves dancing in the wind outside. They decided that, in Emily's honor, they would participate in a charity event she used to support. Michael felt a mix of nervousness and hope. It was a step to honor his wife's memory and, at the same time, a way to connect further with Sarah. Do you think it will be hard? He asked, concerned. Hard? Yes, without a doubt. But it can also be a way to celebrate her life, Sarah replied, a spark in her eyes. Emily always believed that love and solidarity could change the world. On the night of the event, the atmosphere was charged with emotion. People gathered around tables adorned with flowers and candles, sharing stories about Emily and her contributions. Michael was nervous, but Sarah encouraged him to speak. He stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding. He looked out at the audience and saw familiar faces, friends of Emily who also felt the loss. Hello everyone, he started, his voice trembling. Today we are here to celebrate the life of an incredible woman, my wife, Emily. He took a deep breath. She was a light in our lives, always seeking to help and support others. Her passion for making a difference always inspired me. As he spoke, Michael noticed Sarah in the audience, her eyes shining with pride and sadness at the same time. She had always been the friend Emily needed, and now, in some way, she was being the strength that Michael didn't know he needed. He continued, sharing memories of special moments with Emily, and as his words flowed, he felt the pain of loss transforming into something lighter. After his speech, Sarah was invited to join him. With a nervous smile, she approached the microphone. I was lucky to know Emily during one of her best moments. She always told me she wanted to change the world, and I believe that. For her, every small gesture made a difference, Sarah began, her voice soft but firm. She shared a touching story about a trip they took together, how Emily encouraged her to follow her dreams, and how their friendship was a beacon in dark times. Tears streamed down the faces of many in the audience, including Michael. He felt a wave of love and longing. Emily will always be a part of us, Sarah concluded, emotional. And today, let's honor her legacy by helping those in need. When she stepped off the stage, Michael embraced her, feeling their connection grow. You were amazing, he said in awe. Thank you. I just wanted everyone to know how special she was, Sarah replied, wiping away a tear. In that moment, Michael realized that even amidst the pain there was hope. The pain of losing Emily was still present, but now he felt that alongside Sarah, he could begin to find a path to healing. The city of New York pulsed with its usual energy, but for Michael and Sarah, time seemed to have its own rhythm. In the days that followed Emily's tribute, they met more frequently. The conversations began to flow naturally, as if they were sharing a delicate dance between pain and hope. On a sunny afternoon, Michael and Sarah sat in a cozy cafe in the East Village. The aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods filled the air, but the atmosphere between them was charged with unspoken emotions. Michael watched Sarah as she nervously fiddled with the edge of the table, her fingers caressing the wooden surface. He wondered what was on her mind but decided to break the silence. Sarah, have you thought about what you'd like to do now that we're, in a way, moving forward? He asked the question carefully, knowing the topic could be sensitive. She looked up, surprised by the question. To be honest, I'm not sure. I used to dream of traveling. I've always wanted to see different places, live adventures. But after everything that happened, I kind of gave up on those dreams. Michael looked at her, his heart tightening at the sound of the pain in her voice. Why give up? Life is too short to leave dreams behind. If you still have them, we should find them together. Sarah hesitated, a mix of hope and skepticism in her eyes. You don't understand. Traveling requires money, planning, courage. I can barely stand upright. How can I think about adventures when I can barely cope with the present? But that's exactly what we need to do, Michael insisted, his voice firm. We need to find a way that leads us out of pain, to new beginnings. I want to help you realize that dream, Sarah. You're not alone in this. Michael's words penetrated Sarah like a ray of light on a cloudy day. She smiled timidly, but insecurity still lingered over her. Do you really think I could? What if I fail again? What if the pain comes back? It's not about failing or succeeding, Michael replied, his voice gentle. It's about trying, about opening yourself up to new experiences. And if the pain returns, we'll face it together. We're bound by our losses, but also by our resilience. Sarah felt tears threaten to spill from her eyes. Michael's unconditional support was something she hadn't expected, and it made her feel vulnerable. You're an incredible person, Michael, but I don't want to be a burden to you. I don't want you to feel like you have to save me. That's not what I'm doing, he countered. I'm just trying to help a friend find the strength that's always been within her. You deserve this chance, Sarah. Let's take it one step at a time, but we can't let fear paralyze us. She took a deep breath and, looking at him, saw determination in his eyes. Okay, I want to try, but what if I don't know where to start? Michael smiled, a glimmer of enthusiasm in his eyes. You can start by writing. Remember the idea of the book? Your story is powerful and can inspire others. This could be the first step to rediscovering the world. Sarah bit her lip, considering the suggestion. Writing, I don't know if I'm good enough for that. You don't need to be great, just authentic, he encouraged. So write about your experiences, about Emily, about your pain and your hopes. That's the true power of storytelling. She nodded slowly, the idea beginning to take shape in her mind. Maybe you're right. I can try. And I'll be here to help with whatever you need, Michael promised, reaching across the table and gently touching her hand. Together, we can do this. The touch of their hands generated a new and unexpected sensation. It was a reminder of the support they offered each other, a sign that despite the wounds of the past, there was room for healing and renewal. They both knew the journey would be long and filled with challenges, but together, they were willing to face it. As the soft afternoon light filtered through the window of Sarah's small apartment, Michael and she sat side by side at an improvised table, surrounded by papers, pens, and a laptop. The smell of fresh coffee still lingered in the air, a remnant of their long, deep conversations that had become increasingly frequent. It was a cozy environment, but the tension in the unspoken words between them was palpable. You know, I always thought that writing a book about my life would be a way to set myself free, Sarah began, looking at the papers in front of her. But now, with you here, I feel like I'm reliving everything again, and I don't know if I'm ready for that. Michael watched her closely, his gaze soft and encouraging. Sarah, you don't have to do this alone. I'm here to help, and maybe this will help me understand Emily better. The pain you carry is a part of her, and I want to honor that connection. She hesitated, biting her lower lip as she thought about the memories she was about to bring to light. I just don't want this to be a burden for you. It's hard enough dealing with all this. On the contrary, Michael replied, leaning forward, his voice filled with sincerity. I want to know more about her. I want to understand what made her laugh, what made her sad. Every piece of her life is a part of me now. The vulnerability in Michael's words made Sarah feel a bit more at ease. She sighed, opening an old notebook she had brought to the table. When we were young, Emily and I had so many dreams. I always wanted to travel to places we only read about in books. You know, she wanted to be a writer, but life took a different turn, and I stopped believing in myself. You can still realize those dreams, Michael said, his voice firm. Life may have changed, but that doesn't mean you can't reclaim them. Look at us now, we're here, ready to rewrite our stories. It's easy for you to say that, Sarah murmured, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. You're a successful businessman. I'm just a woman who lost everything, and yet here we are, together, he replied, a faint smile forming on his lips. We can rebuild our lives from the ashes. Let's do it for Emily. Let's show her that we haven't forgotten her. Sarah finally smiled, a small smile that lit up her tired face. Do you really believe we can do this? I know we can, Michael said, excited. Let's start with your stories. What would you like to tell first? She hesitated, her gaze distant. Maybe I can start with the first time I met Emily. It was in school and I was the new kid. She welcomed me, as if we had been friends forever. That sounds perfect. Go ahead, tell me everything, Michael encouraged, picking up a pen and opening a new document on the laptop. It was a sunny day and I was so nervous. I remember sitting alone in the cafeteria, trying to hide behind my lunch when she approached me. You look lost, she said with such a radiant smile. Want to join me? She always had that way of lighting up a room. It was like she brought the sun with her, Michael commented, encouraging Sarah to continue. Yes, exactly. And from that moment on, we became inseparable. She introduced me to everyone and made me feel at home, Sarah said, the emotion in her voice growing. But there was something deeper. I felt like there was a part of her that she didn't show to everyone, like she was struggling with something that no one else could see. And did that worry you? Michael asked, capturing every word she said. Yes, I always wanted to help her, but I didn't know how. And when everything happened, when she died, I felt so powerless, Sarah confessed, her voice choked with emotion. You weren't alone. You're still not, Michael assured her. We're in this together, and we will honor her memory. With that, the conversation flowed naturally, and Sarah's words began to fill the blank pages of the laptop. Each written sentence was a mix of memories, laughter, and tears, and each new revelation brought them closer together. What had begun as a solitary struggle for redemption and healing was transforming into a shared path, where wounds could be healed not in solitude, but in the company of someone who truly cared. Michael and Sarah sat in the car, their hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel as they approached the site of the accident. The sky was overcast, as if the world around them was also feeling the weight of the occasion. The silence between them was thick, filled only by the sound of the engine and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Both were nervous, aware that they were about to confront one of the most painful moments of their lives. Are you ready? Michael asked, his voice tense, unable to take his eyes off the road stretching ahead. He was sure the question was not just about physical presence, but about the emotional courage they would both need for this moment. I'm not sure, Sarah replied, her voice barely a whisper. She looked out the window, watching the passing scenery, as if the beauty of the world outside could distract her from the pain she was about to relive. I never thought I'd come back here. Me neither, but maybe it's necessary, Michael said, trying to sound confident. We need to understand what happened. Perhaps that will help us find some closure. With one last deep breath, Sarah nodded, and together they stepped out of the car. The air was heavy, and the atmosphere seemed charged with untold memories. They walked along the path leading to the accident site, each step becoming an emotional challenge. The sight of the place where the tragedy occurred felt almost surreal, and Michael's mind was a whirlwind of memories and feelings. I remember the last time I was here, Sarah began, breaking the silence, her voice trembling. It was a sunny day, and I was thinking about how everything was finally going well for Emily. I could never have imagined this would happen. Neither could I, Michael murmured, the pain of losing Emily still fresh in his mind. He recalled the happy moments they shared and the joy she brought into his life. I couldn't save her. I should have done something more. Sarah turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. Michael, you didn't know, no one did. We can't carry this guilt alone. They reached the exact spot where the accident took place. The marks on the asphalt were still visible, and the scene seemed frozen in time. Michael, in a sudden impulse, knelt down and touched the ground as if that could somehow connect him with Emily's presence. I'm sorry, my love, he whispered, his voice choked. I feel like I failed you. Sarah moved closer and knelt beside him. We're both here for her. We need to remember that she loved life, and we need to learn to live again, even if that feels impossible right now. How can we do that? Michael asked, vulnerability evident in his voice. How can we move forward when we feel this emptiness inside us? Maybe we should allow ourselves to feel the pain. We can't run from it. And at the same time, we need to find a way to honor her memory, to celebrate who she was, Sarah replied, her voice steady, even as tears streamed down her face. You're right, he agreed, feeling a new determination rising within him. I want to do this. I want to honor Emily the way she deserves. Sarah looked at him, a glimmer of hope starting to form in her eyes. Then let's do it together. We don't have to carry this weight alone. We have each other. In that moment, something changed between them. The words they exchanged were not only about pain and loss, but also about support and the possibility of healing. Michael felt that, although the pain was still present, there was a spark of hope beginning to shine. And looking into Sarah's eyes, he realized he had found someone who was also fighting, someone who could understand his pain in a way no one else could. With one last look at the accident site, they stood up, ready to face whatever came next, together. The cool afternoon breeze made the leaves of the trees dance around Michael and Sarah as they approached the accident site. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, but the beauty of the moment was overshadowed by the emotions they both carried. The asphalt seemed darker than ever, a cruel reminder of what had happened. They exchanged a nervous glance, a reflection of their insecurities and fears. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Michael took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I don't know, Sarah. It's hard. I thought coming here would help me face this, but the pain, it's still so present," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I feel the same way," Sarah confessed, looking at the ground. "It's like we're trapped in a cycle of pain. I feel responsible, even though I know I couldn't have done anything." The tension in the air was palpable. They moved closer to the spot where the accident had taken place, the sight of the scene making both their hearts race. Michael looked at the asphalt, remembering that fateful night, while Sarah gazed at the road with tears in her eyes. "If I had gotten there on time, if I had done something," Michael murmured, the guilt weighing on him like an anchor in his chest. "You can't carry this alone," Sarah said softly. "No one could have predicted this. Emily." She was fighting her own battles. Just as the conversation seemed to deepen, a familiar figure appeared in the distance. Michael furrowed his brow, recognizing the man approaching. It was Emily's brother, Daniel, whom he hadn't seen since the funeral. He looked paler and had an expression of pain on his face, as if the years of separation and guilt had consumed him. "Michael," he said, his voice tense. "Sarah." "Daniel," Michael replied, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "What are you doing here?" "I didn't know you guys would be here," Daniel answered, looking at the ground. "I needed to come. There are things I need to say." The atmosphere grew increasingly heavy. Sarah, sensing the tension, stepped forward. "What do you want to say?" Daniel took a deep breath before speaking. I was trying to help Emily. She was going through a tough time, and I couldn't be there for her. On the day of the accident, I was on my way to meet her. I wanted her to know she wasn't alone." Daniel's words hung in the air, a weight that everyone felt. Michael looked at Emily's brother, his mind racing with new information. "Did you know she was struggling?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, and I tried to help. I just didn't get there in time." "You can't blame yourself for that," Sarah interjected, her voice filled with empathy. "Life is full of things we can't control." Daniel looked at her, surprised by the compassion she was showing. "Did you know her well?" "I was her friend for many years," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "Emily was an incredible person, but we all have our battles." Then Daniel pulled a letter from his pocket, his hands trembling. "I found this among her belongings after she died. I never had the courage to read it, but now, maybe it's time." He handed the letter to Michael, who hesitated before opening it. Emily's words began to resonate in Michael's mind as he read aloud, almost as if reciting a mantra. "Sometimes the darkness is so intense that it feels like there will never be light again. But I know there is always a light, and that light is you, Sarah. You have always been a light in my life, even when I couldn't see it." Michael paused, emotion overtaking him. She cared about you, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with feeling. "She wanted you to know you mattered." Sarah, tears in her eyes, looked at Michael and then at Daniel. I didn't know she felt that way. I always thought I had failed." Daniel, now with tears streaming down his face, stepped closer to Sarah and hugged her. "We all fail in some way, but that doesn't mean we can't find each other again together." Michael watched the scene, his heart warming with the connection forming between them. The pain still existed, but now there was room for hope and forgiveness. The three of them were united in their struggle, ready to face the past and seek a brighter future. We've reached the end of this touching story. If you enjoyed it and want to see more narratives like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Right now, there's a playlist of videos on your screen. If you'd like to keep watching these moving stories, just click on it to start. And now, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from and leave a like to support our work. Now, a sincere question. Do you agree with what happened in the story? We want to hear your thoughts. Until the next video.